Anyway, I'm very happy about this program, especially because I have my sweetheart Kim, but Blair, and the three of us are probably the nucleus for the Rich Dad Company. And Kim, Blair, and I were running around Hawaii, not too serious about professions and life, and the Rich Dad Company wouldn't be here if not for Kim, Blair, and myself. Anything you want to say about that, Kim?
Well, it's interesting. I never was much into education. Once I graduated college, I'm like, I don't want to step foot in another classroom for the rest of my life. And I got introduced to seminars and learning and classes that I loved. And it was very experiential. And so my love of learning got totally reignited in Hawaii with Robert and with Blair. And we did a lot of crazy things together. We've done a lot of crazy workshops and seminars. And, we're going to talk about one of the most important things during this time right now is how you spend your spare time. And I look back on our weekends, our evenings, we did so much in our spare time to move us forward to where we are today. So we get some good stories to tell, don't we, Blair? We get some good stories.
We do. Well, I think in Hawaii, while other people were going surfing, we were locked in hotel rooms and doing crazy things. I mean, some of the things that we did solely for the purpose of just getting better and trying to learn something, I wouldn't recommend most of those things to most people today. But through all of it, it was priceless because it allowed all of us to be able to push forth a vision, to be able to serve a lot more people. And so when tough times like these come around, it's like, oh, another one. And it's a very different experience.
Yeah, this is a time to get ahead right now. This is not a time to be wait for the new normal to come back. Like when I first met Kim, this was in '83, I believe, and I was getting pretty serious about 84. Oh, 84. I was getting serious about her. I said, I better figure out what kind of woman she is, So my first gift to you, what was my first gift to you, Kim?
It was not a trip to Maui, and it was not jewelry, and it was not a nice bottle of champagne. It was an accounting class.
Only Robert would have the guts
to send me to an accounting class, which I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And this is the time. This was the
gift.
Yeah, I mean, this was the course that reignited my love of learning because I went to it being very, had the stigma of what school was like, and it was called the accounting game. And we actually created, Blair, the course, we created a lemonade stand. We had product, we had inventory, we had income, expenses, had to work the numbers, we had to market, we had to sell. It was so exciting. And I learned so much in those few days of accounting. And I took accounting in college and I learned nothing. But it most important, it ignited that, it lit that spark and ignited that spark of my love of learning. And that changed everything. And that's when, again, our spare time, weekends, evenings, whenever, were spent learning. It was spent learning. And we do that today, to this day. We're always looking for the next thing. What's gonna give us that advantage?
So I figured I might as well just go for it now. And then, so I purchased this ticket to the accounting game, and Kim goes, "What the hell's this guy?" She barely knew me, and she sat there, and I was so turned on because she got turned on by learning, and it's really called personal development, and especially in today's environment, personal development becomes more important than your college degree, because we don't learn much about personal development in college except not to make mistakes and get good grades and things like that. So when Kim and I watched her learning and play the accounting game and all that, I said, this is my kind of woman. And so that's why I think it's kind of interesting that Blair, Kim, and I are on this call, because very few people hear that story. And as for Blair and I, we're putzing around. I was running my nylon wallet company, and was just struggling. And Blair was running some kind of surf shop or something.
That's right. Little surf
And
shop, Waikiki.
we were going broke fast.
Yeah, but the thing was is that we were both kind of legends in our own mind at the time, even though we weren't doing so well. You were doing the nylon wallet thing. I had some crazy partner who had sold me into a retail business that I knew nothing about. But it wasn't even about that. It was because of that I met you. And it was because of that we started, I went to my first personal development program on a bet that I wouldn't last the 2 days.
Yeah.
And it changed everything.
And your two friends, Kraft and Gale, they stopped, and they're still legends in their own mind. I mean, they're both long-haired hippies sitting out in Hawaii with no money, but they stopped. I mean, that's easy to do in Hawaii because life is pretty easy. But I think for Kim, Blair, and myself, we never stopped. And one day this instructor said, we'd like to have, Blair and I are going to train to be instructors. The problem is, I think most of you know that public speaking is a fear greater than death. I mean, some people would rather die. So Blair and myself and about 8 other guys got together and I said, we're going to be the best instructors we could be. So we'd get together every Tuesday night and we would practice making public talks. And so it was one night, it was my time to put on my presentation.
Can I tell the story?
Huh?
Please do. Please do.
Okay, because perception is everything, right? So you got to get, this was grueling. Every Thursday, or Tuesday or Thursday, we would go in there and practice and practice and practice, and we would hammer each other with objections. You don't know what you're talking about, all this stuff for the purpose of getting strong, getting confident. We would throw objections at each other that no person should ever have to hear about, right? And people would make stuff up. And the whole idea of the game was to get the speaker who was up there flustered, whatever you could. And so Robert was up there, and I think you were doing some overhead slides, black and white overhead slides. And everybody's booing, boring, terrible. And Robert got a little upset. He goes, screw you guys. I'm going to do this presentation the way I want to. I'm out of here. And he grabbed his overheads and he stormed for the door. Well, also there was another guy in that program. His name was Carl Haushalter. How big was he?
He was a big man.
He's a managing partner of Arthur Young, accounting firm. And he's a very good man.
Great man. Yeah. Big man, lots of credibility, big heart. And he blocked the door. He got in front of the door and he goes, Robert, he goes, if you're quitting, you're going to have to get through me first. And there was silence in the room. The whole room was like, whoa, what's going to happen now? And there was silence. Robert looks around, he goes, turned around, went back up and kept on presenting and kept on getting better. And there was a big turning point for all of us that no matter how hot it would get, the commitment was solely to get better.
And then how does it play out till today? Like today I'm making more money than ever before, simply because I can do 5 of those seminars in a day all over the world via Zoom calls and things like that. But if I hadn't gone through that pain of having Haushalter and Blair and all the other characters in that room just pound the crap out of you, we wouldn't be making the money today. So my way of saying is that, it's what you're going to be doing today that's going to determine tomorrow. And then really and the more stress you put yourself under, the better you get. So Kim saw me, there's always a payback. So one day I had to introduce Carl Haushalter in my first public talk. So Haushalter is a guy that pounds me. He locks the door and won't let me out. And then fate would have it, I have to introduce him at some event. So why don't you tell that story, Kim?
Well, and now let me just say this. The one thing that came out of that for me and what we do today, and we constantly do it, the word is practice. We practice, and we practice things that most people are afraid of. For me, my first time public speaking, I was praying for an earthquake. Sit literally going, please, a tidal wave, an earthquake, anything, so I don't have to get up on that stage. And then I did it, and I did it again, and I practiced. So for you, Robert, your very, very first talk introducing Carl Haushalter, which was a 2-minute introduction, you practice. I watched you practice for like 2 weeks straight. 2 weeks, practice in front of a mirror, practice. And then actually driving to it was a breakfast meeting, driving there, you were so nervous that you almost crashed the car. But you got up there and you did a brilliant 2-minute introduction. And then again, you guys, you just kept practicing to be the best speakers. But that's, I think, what a lot of people aren't willing to do. I think one of the things that we do are things that most, 99% of the people aren't willing to do. They're not willing to put themselves under the stress. They're not willing to go through the fear or the humiliation or whatever it is. Yeah. And I think that's what makes the three of us so strong.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kim. It's kind of like, I think for the three of us, there's this belief anyway, at least for me, that there's a bigger, better person inside there someplace. And so all of the training and the practice, it's not even so much to be the best speaker or to be the best entrepreneur. It's like something's going to come out of there. Something's going to pop out. I'm going to find that part. And I think if a person's watching, to know that there's probably that in there too, but you're going to have to work to get it. You have to learn, you have to practice, and it'll pop out.
Yeah, and then the way it pays off is that years later, I write Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Exactly.
And I'm out in Australia, and Kim gets a phone call from Oprah. And I had just got to Australia. And why don't you tell that story? And then...
Rich Dad, Poor Dad was now on the New York Times bestseller. We were self-published, New York Times bestseller list, Business Week, Wall Street Journal. And yes, Oprah calls. Her producer calls and says, we want Robert on our program. And I'm like, and you got to understand, I'm a believer in asking for what you want. I had Post-its for years, Post-its all over the office, all over my house. Robert on Oprah, all over the place. And so when the producer called, I'm like, oh my God, you're kidding. And it's like, when do we want him here? We want him here on this date. And I'm like, okay. So he's off in the bush of Australia. There's no cell phones at this point. I think I found you on a satellite phone or something. And I said, Robert, I'm so excited. Oprah called and you're going to be on our show. And so you got to get home early. And you're like, no, I just got here. I'm not coming back. And I didn't have much patience at that point. And I said, get your you-know-what home right now. And he flew home. And the day he flew home, the Oprah team was there filming. We kind of got them doing other things for a while so Robert could get, showered and ready. And then boom, he was on. And then later we flew to Chicago where we actually went live with Oprah on her program.
But there was one more story, is that wouldn't have happened if Kim hadn't, had done her own personal development, because the producer says, so here I am flying back from Australia. And it said, Robert's not getting on the program until Rich Dad's son gets on with you. Remember that, Kim?
Yeah, they said, if you don't tell us who Rich Dad is, then Robert's not on the show. And I was by myself on the phone with the producer, all by myself. Robert's in Australia on his way here. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this, because what had happened is Robert had made an agreement earlier with Rich Dad and his family that the book would be fine, but please don't reveal who Rich Dad was. That was Robert's agreement. And so when that producer called, I said, I can't break that vow. And I can't believe I'm going to tell you this, but if that's the requirement, then Robert's not going to be able to be on the show. And I hung up the phone, and I'm like, what the heck did I just do? What did I just do? My biggest dream. What did I just do? And I'm sitting there, my body, I'm shaking. I'm like so nervous. And within 2 minutes, the producer calls back and says, okay, we got to figure out how we're going to make this happen. I'm like, yes. Oh. But again, a lot of that comes from and personal development. We're talking about, just being better, being a better person, getting your mind out of your way, getting the fear out of your way.
The one thing I'll say about that, Kim, one thing about you that I've watched over all the years that we've been friends is that that commitment to keeping your brain clear, to visualizing clearly, getting blocks out of the way. I call it little voice mastery stuff. I mean, relentless. And so when those things come up, the reason most people don't get a lot of people don't get what they want is because their brain is so clogged up with useless information and doubts and can't do this and why it won't work and why that won't work. But you have always been the eternal optimist. It's like, just give me good news and good news is going to happen. And I just watch, I'm going, how the heck does she do that? But it's not luck. It's because of what you said. It's because of all the time spent working on personal development, working on little voice mastery, doing that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Blair. Thanks.
And so what happens is I arrive in Phoenix, and Kim has now cleared the deck one more time, and they film us in Phoenix, and then we fly to Chicago. And I'm still not getting it. I mean, things are moving so fast. Like Kim says, Rich Dad Poor Dad was now on the New York Times bestseller list. It was a self-published book. It had to be self-published because every editor who turned the book down said I didn't know what I was talking about. And so anyway, Oprah kind of liked the book. So I remember sitting in the green room, and I'm kind of looking out on the stage there. There's two chairs. And I'm going, oh, that's kind of interesting, And then all of a sudden I realize one chair is for Oprah and one chair is for me. And I still remember saying to myself, well, I guess it's too late to practice now. and what Blair was saying is you practice for that moment. And then there's no turning back. At that point, you've got to be, there's all cliche, be 110%, which is a bunch of fucking bullshit. But at that point, you better be on. You've got to be on. And when I meet most wimps and pussies and all that stuff, they just never practice for that moment. So when the moment shows up, they back off, they quit, they die. And I still remember, I said, holy mackerel. And then Oprah comes on, and I go walking on that stage, and my life changed. What was it? What was your experience, Kim? Because I was blind up there. I was just.
It was like you called on all those years of practice at that moment. You called on it, and it was brilliant, and it was funny, and you and Oprah were laughing together, and it was magical. But it was all those previous years of practice, and all the stuff you did in your spare time, and all the seminars we attended, everything, all the study. And Oprah was syndicated to 150 countries. So the show airs and we're in 150 countries overnight. So yeah, there is an Oprah effect and it's pretty strong. So I guess the question for, people watching is, we have this time now, we've had it for months now. And how are you using this time? Are you using it to study, to learn, whether it's business, whether it's personal development? I think the two definitely go hand in hand. But how are you using the time is probably the most important question. What are you doing in your spare time?
Yeah, because at some level, you're practicing for something right now. If you're doing nothing, you're practicing to get nothing done. Okay, if you're actually actively whatever is of interest to you, could be, like you said, could be business, could be your health, could be relationships, could be whatever it is that you enjoy or have an interest toward, is to practice and study more. Because like Robert says, you can't practice for the big event. You're always practicing for something, right? Preparing for your business, trying to make sales, whatever. But the big event always comes mysteriously from the side. And as Robert said, like with Oprah, man, you just got to be ready for that moment. Mind's got to be clear. Too late to practice now. You're on. And that's life.
So Blair, let me ask you, because a little voice mastery, what is it that, we all know what we're supposed to do? And to Robert too, the question, we all know what we're supposed to do, but why don't we do it? What is that little voice mastery? How does that get in the way from doing what it is we know we need to do?
Well, lots of reasons. I mean, first reason is because most people are comfortable where they're at until recently. Okay. Most people are comfortable where you're at. You know, I was telling Robert and I were talking yesterday. I have a great, one of our mutual friends, Mac Newton, says crisis is change that's trying to happen. Change trying to happen. So all the things going on, the crisis we're in now are changes that have been trying to take place for a long time, but nobody paid attention to them because everything was easy. Now, all of a sudden, a virus and all this stuff and all the cracks in the foundation show up, which is a giant opportunity now to fix the cracks. So the reason people don't do it, number one, in my experience, because they don't have to. There's no crisis at hand. So they don't perceive they got to do anything because they can make do. And the other one is because of fear. Because what if what if I expose myself, if I put myself into a bigger game, I might get shot down. People won't like me, all of that stuff. I mean, there's a million reasons, but every reason is a reason to practice, is a reason to study. The question is, you take a look at what do you want to do in life, what you want to contribute, and who do you got to be that person. So you better start changing who you're going to be now. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to have or do the things you need to do.
What you guys are talking about, and Blair, you were talking specifically about it, is most people, they look at what they want to have and they go, I want to have this. Like your friends in the Japanese guys in Hawaii, I want to have this, but they don't do what it takes to change this and to change their being and to change that little voice and to change themselves. They don't look at changing the being, so they remain small.
That's right.
And that's what you were saying, Blair. In order to grow, and the personal development changes the being so that you can do and have more.
Yeah, I'd say that for the three of us and for the people in RichDad and the advisors as well, is that, and I think, Robert, you call it the secret weapon, which is the willingness to work on this, to work on the little voice, to get past your fears, to get past the insecurities, to get to the root of it, pull those things out by the root, and be the big person that you always hoped that you could be. Start there. Who do you want to be, and act as if, and train as if, and get the best mentors and teachers in the world to support you in that. And again, you don't know when Oprah is going to call. You don't know when the opportunity is going to show up.
And if, Robert, you didn't do all the work you did, you would have just been one of those Hilo boys.
Yep. One of those
You might have decided to stay in Australia and not come home for the interview.
Glenn Miyashiro, But anyway, the other thing is that when I went to when I was getting out of the Marine Corps, my poor dad wanted me to go get my MBA and then maybe my PhD. And he says, well, you can go fly for the airlines, basically be an employee. And I didn't want to do that because I knew I could get a high paying job. That was not an issue to me. I could either sail ships for Standard Oil or I could fly for United Airlines. And I already been there, done that. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur like my rich dad. So when I asked my rich dad, I said, what does it take? He says, well, you've got to learn how to sell. And again, the little Hilo boy comes back up, the shy little Japanese boy. And I said, well, I really don't want to sell. He says, well, then you can't be an entrepreneur. And it says the number one skill of an entrepreneur's ability to sell. And I fought it, and I was stationed in Hawaii at the Marine Corps Air Station there, and I just kept asking my rich dad, I said, there's got to be a better way. He says, you got to go through it. And so with that, when I finally got ready to leave the Marine Corps, I went and applied to two companies. One was IBM because they had sales training, and the other was Xerox. And I went for the sales training, not for the job, but for the sales training. And so I got hired by Xerox, and I was failing because the little Japanese boy was still on the way. I was so afraid of being rejected, just terrified of it. And so I'm struggling. So they fly me from Hawaii to Leesburg, Virginia. I go through their basic sales training program for 3 weeks. They fly me back to Hawaii, 6 months on selling in downtown Honolulu. And then I fly back to Leesburg, Virginia. So I now have the best sales training in the world, but I still can't sell. You know what I mean? I now went through the beginning and I went through the advanced, and I still can't sell because the little Japanese boy from Hawaii is still holding me back. And I'm about to get fired from Xerox because my sales numbers just do not come up. They do not come up. I was so afraid. You know, I could fly my helicopter into combat. I had no problem with that. But knocking on doors, I was terrified. So I went to talk to my rich dad again. His office was in Waikiki. And I sat down with him and I said, "What's wrong?" He's really smart. He just asked one quick question. He says, "How many sales calls do you make a day?" And I said, "On a good day, 3. You know, all day long, 3 sales calls?" Because Blair, you know what it's like to cold call, right? You're just knocking on doors, knocking on doors. People are saying no, no, no. And if you get in front of 3 possible customers, that's a pretty good day. And my rich dad just laughed and he says, "The reason you're failing is because you're not failing fast enough." Again, the message is the same. He says, "You've got to find a way to step up your failure rate." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He says, "You've got to fail at least 30 times a day." So then I had to figure out how am I going to fail 30 times a day and still keep my job. So I was in downtown Honolulu, and I went uptown to a nonprofit charity, and I volunteered to dial for dollars from 7 to 9:30 a night. And my goal was to fail 30 times a night. And so I sat on that phone and I made those 30 phone calls. And I didn't care what it took, as long as I made those 30 phone calls. Now, ironically, what happened, my sales at Xerox went up. So we're not just talking. There's a lot of people who are just bullshitting themselves. They speak the good line, they speak the platitudes, the words, but they really don't do anything. You know, like this AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, "Oh, we're going to get rid of the police and more welfare will help people." I'm going, are you kidding me? You know, MMT, Marxist monetary theory. So what we're seeing is the decline of the American empire. You know, this happened back in the Roman Empire when the reason they had the big Colosseum was the Roman government was debasing their coins and they were taxing the workers. So the workers were the farmer was working so hard, but the government kept taxing him. And so finally the Roman farmers said, "We're not going to work anymore." So they came into the Colosseums and they'd sit there and they had to find a way to entertain them. So that's when they had the feeding Christians to lions and all this other stuff. And meanwhile, the Roman government was stealing their money. And they're still fighting these wars like we're doing now. And nothing has changed. We're at the end of the Roman Empire. We're now at the end of the American Empire. Everything's the same. The government's lying and cheating and stealing, ripping us off. Our education system still doesn't teach us anything about money. And now everybody believes they deserve a UBI, universal basic income. So I think it's the end. And it's because most people would rather be given money rather than, give a man a fish rather than teach him to fish. And I think that's where we are today. So that's why I'm happy to endorse what we do here as far as education, but not for everybody. Our Federal Reserve Bank is criminal. And I wrote this book here, Who Stole My Pension? And I was cracking up watching all these guys run into Neiman Marcus and Apple stores and Nike stores and looting them. I said, "Oh, they're looting the stores." I said, "Yeah, well, Wall Street's looting your pension." And the average American is so effing stupid. They can't see it. So anyway, it's kind of a funny time, but it's the time that we've chosen to be incarnated. And that's why, I'm glad to have Blair and Kim and I just tell some stories of what it takes to get out of the mindset of Hawaii. To be just a bunch of surfer kids and having it was fun. I love Hawaii. Nice lifestyle, huh, Kim?
It was a great lifestyle. It was a great lifestyle. And you know, to your point, Robert, is, you know, even when we were doing things that were a little unusual, and you know, we even going to seminars on weekends, our friends would say, "What are you doing? You know, what are you doing? Why aren't you at the beach? Why aren't you, you know, partying with everybody?" Or when I quit my job, we quit, and you left Rippers to start our own business. People say, "Well, what did you do that for? That's risky." And so there's all this noise. So today there's even more noise,